A Tale of Two Families, brought to you by Tales by Adoni. Joseph had lived two lives, two families, two worlds. One hidden in the shadows, a burden he barely acknowledged. The other, the light of his life, the family he adored, the children he raised with love and care. But life, as Joseph would one day learn, has a way of balancing the scales. In a modest run-down home on the outskirts of town lived Grace, his first wife, and their only son, David. For years, Joseph treated Grace with coldness and disdain, blaming her for everything that has gone wrong in his life. David, their son, barely knew a kind word from his father. David, you are nothing. Nothing like I hoped for. Joseph would say, voice sharp, each word like a knife, cutting into the boy's fragile confidence. You will never amount to anything. David, though young, carried the weight of his father's scorn like a heavy clock. His mother, Grace, frail and worn down by tears of neglect, would quietly endure the same treatment. She shielded David as much as she could, but the wounds from Joseph's cruelty ran deep. They were poor, barely making ends meet, and Joseph offered little support, both emotionally and financially. And yet, just a few miles away, Joseph lived another life, one of comfort and love. In a spacious, warm home lived with Maria, Joseph's second wife, and their two children, Lily and Sam. In this house, Joseph was a completely different man. He was gentle, he was loving, a father who came home each night with gifts and laughter. He showered them with affection and gave them everything they desired. Lily, Sam, come here, my darlings, Joseph would say as he walked through the door, his arms wide opened, a smile spread across his face. The children would run to him, their faces lit with joy. Maria would smile from the kitchen, content with the life they shared. The two lives were so different, so stark in contrast. Yet, Joseph kept both afloat. One, fueled by love and adoration. The other, weighed down by the resentment and bitterness. He had conceived himself that this was how life was meant to be. Compartmentalized, divided. He could be a loving father in one life and a tyrant in the other, and no one would ever know. But secrets, like poison, they have a way of spreading. Chapter 2. Years passed, and David grew into a young man. He had carried the burden of his father's cruelty for so long, but it had broken him. In fact, it had forged him into something stronger. He had taken up jobs after jobs, determined to pull his mother out of the life of poverty and misery that Joseph had left them in. His nights were long, his hands rough from labor, but David was relentless. I'll take care of you, Mom, I promise, he says as he wiped the sweat from his brow after long days. Grace, now sick and weakened, would smile faintly. You've been a good boy, David. Better than your father ever gave you credit for, she would whisper, her voice cracking with age and illness. Meanwhile, Joseph's life with Maria and their children was beginning to change. The children were growing up, moving out, and starting their own lives. Maria has since noticed Joseph's absence more and more. He was still a good father in their eyes, but something in Joseph had shifted. As years passed, he began to feel the weight of his decisions. He watched as Lily and Sam began to pull away, their lives busier and less focused on their aging father, Joseph, who had once been the center of their world, was slowly being left behind. It was during this time that David was now a successful businessman in his own right. Discovered the truth about his father. He found out about Maria, Lily, and Sam, about the life Joseph had built while leaving him and his mother in squalor. The news hit him hard, but instead of anger, David felt a cold sense of resolve. His mother had died by then, but he kept his promise. He has taken care of her until her last breath, giving her a life Joseph never had. David decided it was time to face his father. Chapter 3. Joseph, now an old man, sat alone in an empty room. Maria had passed away a few years ago. Lily and Sam were busier even with their own families. The house, once filled with love and laughter, now silent. Joseph's health was failing, and he could no longer pretend that everything was fine. He had tried to reach out to his children, but they were distant, preoccupied with their own lives. The adoration they once had for him was now replaced with indifference. One evening, there was a knock on Joseph's door. Slowly, he rose from his chair, every step heavy with the weight of regret. When he opened the door, there stood David, now a man Joseph barely recognized. David? Joseph's voice cracked. Is that really you? David looked at his father, the man who has caused him and his mother so much pain. The years of neglect, the cruel words, the abandonment, it flooded back in an instant. But David didn't feel anger, he felt pity. So this is how you ended up, David said, in his voice steady but cold. Alone. Joseph's eyes filled with tears. Maria, the kids, they don't come around anymore. They've moved on. I'm all alone, David. I never wanted this for us, for any of us. David stared at his father, seeing the broken man before him. You had two families, Dad. You chose to love one and destroy the other. Now look where it has left you. Joseph lowered his head, his hands trembling. I was wrong, David. About everything. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. David paused for a moment, his heart heavy with the weight of years of pain. Mom's gone now, you know. But she didn't need you, and neither did I. With those final words, David turned and walked away, leaving Joseph to stand in the doorway, alone with his regrets. Chapter 4. Joseph watched as his son disappeared into the night, his heart breaking with the realization of what he had lost. He had spent his life loving one family and forsaking another, and in the end, both had slipped through his fingers. Now Joseph was left with nothing but the cold, empty silence of his home. The laughter that once filled the rooms were gone, replaced by the sound of his hollow breaths. He had reaped what he had sown. And now, in his final days, Joseph lived with the bitter taste of regret, knowing that no amount of sorrow could ever bring back the love he had thrown away. The end. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.